Well, folks in Marathon on the Florida Keys is still feeling the wrath of Hurricane George at this hour. Marathon continues to get pounded by heavy rain and some strong winds. We'll most likely see this continue through the next few hours. At its height, winds were gusting more than 100 miles an hour. Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Weather Center. I'm Jeanette Jones, reporting live from the Forecast Center here at the Weather Channel. As we continue to monitor the situation, it is not looking good for later on this weekend for folks in the Gulf Coast. We are not finished with Hurricane George, even though it is moving away from the Florida Keys and away from South Florida. Let's take a look at the latest satellite imagery. You can see how it continues its west-northwest track. But we're still seeing some banding of showers and thunder showers and definitely some heavy rainfall here across the Keys, even though the center of circulation is moving away from the Keys. And I'm joined now by our hurricane expert, John Hope. John, we have been watching this very closely. Now we're really worried about what's going to happen later on in the weekend.
Yeah, we're going to have a little bit of a breathing spell here. It's pulling away from the peninsula of Florida now in the Florida Keys, and conditions there are gradually subsiding. But then it's expected to turn more northwestward into the Gulf and affect somewhere up on the northern Gulf Coast by late Saturday or Sunday.
Okay, so we're going to have to keep a close watch on that. Let's take a look at the latest information on Hurricane George. This is as of 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 24.9 north, 82.9 west. That centers at 515 miles southeast of Mobile, Alabama. Winds are still at 105 miles per hour. That makes it a Category 2 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale. It's moving west-northwest at 14 miles per hour and the estimated pressure at 975 millibars. Now, want to go over these hurricane watches and warnings. We no longer have the watches or warnings here along the east coast of Florida, so that is good news. But we still have hurricane warnings from Longboat Key, Florida to Key Largo, Florida. And we do have hurricane watches now from Morgan City, Louisiana to St. Marks, Florida. Now, some of those watches will probably be changing to warnings at some point tonight or into tomorrow. We will let you know when that does occur. Tropical storm advisories, I should say warnings, in effect from Bayport, Florida to Longboat Key, Florida. So that is the deal with the watches and warnings. The most important note here is that the East Coast seeing all of the watches and warnings lifted. Looking at this satellite vantage point, it's getting a little bit dark, but again, John, you were pointing out earlier that the eye is clearly visible.
Well, the circulation center at least, and yes, there is an eye there, and the reconnaissance aircraft, we're getting consecutive fixes out there now pretty often, and the pressure is falling. I just came in now with one with 974 millibars, which is the lowest it's been since it was out east of Puerto Rico, I guess.
The lower the pressure, the stronger the intensity.
There's an inverse relationship there. Low pressure, high winds.
Tell me something about the water temperatures as it gets on out into the Gulf of Mexico.
Well, the Gulf of Mexico has, the water temperatures are plenty warm enough. What we need, what we found out that we need to support a hurricane is sea surface temperatures of the order of 82 degrees or higher. And in the Gulf of Mexico right now, as we speak, the temperatures are well above that.
Okay, so that's not going to bode well for a lot of folks. As we look at the radar, we can see that the heavy rain continues in the Keys. We are getting some bands of strong thunderstorms, though, in places like West Palm, on into Fort Myers. Tampa now getting raked with some stronger thunderstorms. We've had reports of funnel clouds throughout the day today near Osceola County and also back towards Tampa. And we've also had reports of possible tornadoes. That's always a threat with this kind of thing, right, John?
Well, yes, and we should point out that these aren't really down there where the core of the hurricane is, and that's also very typical to get these pretty far out from where the core or eye of the hurricane is, and that's certainly the case today up here in Florida.
All right, I want to remind folks we have a tornado watch in effect until 11 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. That may be extended, though, into the wee hours of the morning.
Very likely will, and possibly extend a little bit north. We'll have to wait and see. These should begin to wind down a little bit, Janetta, as the hurricane gets farther away from the coast, but I'm afraid not tonight. I think Florida's in for lots more of that kind of weather.
All right, looking at this satellite vantage point, what do you think, John, about the upper airflow pattern and intensification?
The upper air pattern, we see a well-developed outflow in this hurricane, just as we have morning we didn't see it quite so much in the west, but now we're seeing outflow around the western quadrants a little bit better, and very well developed outflow here in the east. And both of those elements lend to making conditions more favorable for this storm to develop. So there's no really any wind shear out there to inhibit its development.
As we take a look at the projected path, keep in mind a lot of folks have big plans for the weekend. We're trying to help you out here. We're very concerned about the Gulf Coast.
Yes, we are, and as we should be, I think. What we expect to see happen here is eventually over the next 12, 24 hours, this hurricane begin to turn a little bit more toward the northwest and go up in this general vicinity, just about in the middle of that cone there. And you can see here by Sunday morning, where it's not far off the Gulf Coast. And you notice also we've listed the forecast categories there. Right now we're talking about a Category 2 hurricane, and we're forecasting it eventually in the Gulf to become a Category 3, which means that the winds are going to be sustained winds of more than 110 miles per hour.
Which would make it a major hurricane.
A major hurricane, exactly.
And this particular hurricane has been up over that limit.
Oh yes, it was a lot over that at one time. When it was out east of the islands there, it had a maximum wind of 150 miles an hour, almost a Category 5. But this hurricane has spent a lot of time over land, Jeanette, over several islands, over Puerto Rico, over Hispaniola, more than 24 hours over Cuba.
All right. And it still held together.
It did.
Thank you so much, John Hope. We'll check back with you in just a little while. And as always, if you're away from your television set throughout the weekend and you need to know more, and perhaps you have your computer there, tap into the Weather Channel's online service at weather.com. We'll give you the latest. Now back to the studio.
All right, thanks, Jeanne. By the way, this Weather Center is sponsored by Heal Heating and Air Conditioning Systems. Let's go ahead and take a look away from Hurricane George at the rest of the country. And on our current map, you'll notice that actually there's not a whole lot of activity once you move away from the Gulf Coast. And I think we have our current map to look at. And it might be on our other computer. There we go. All righty. We have a front draped across the northern part of the country, some cooler air behind it. We will start to see that come south, and that will mean, if not cool afternoons, definitely some chilly nights with temperatures in the 30s. Along this front, we've seen just a little bit of activity today. We've also had a few showers that are making their way out of Manhattan. That was a brief round of rain for you out through Long Island. Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. should be quiet and dry for the rest of your Friday evening. Again, along our warm front, looks like we now have a few more thunderstorms developing. We had one batch develop and kind of fell apart. A few more here, Rockford up towards Chicago. It looks like they're probably going to be missed to the south, but perhaps down around Peoria, maybe a few showers, but we'll keep an eye on that. Farther west, we're continuing to see the light rain showers in Wyoming and up into Montana as well, into Idaho, passing showers around Boise.
This is what it looked like in Marathon, Florida today as Hurricane George swept through, leaving behind damage and debris. A curfew remains in effect for the Keys with widespread power outages. One Key Largo resident says the hurricane altered water levels in Florida Bay. Hurricane George is churning through the Gulf of Mexico at this hour. Good evening and welcome to Weather Center. I'm Rich Johnson. The Florida Keys are still feeling the effects of the hurricane. Earlier today, as gusts reach high as 113 miles an hour. The big question now is, where will Hurricane George make landfall? Jeanette Jones is in the forecast center with the latest.
Thanks a lot, Rich. Well, Hurricane George has already claimed over 300 lives in the Caribbean, and now President Clinton has declared a state of emergency for folks in Florida and has authorized federal assistance for the damage that has occurred from Hurricane George. Let's get right to it and show you the satellite vantage point. This is the way things are progressing. It is moving away from the Keys, and we think it is going to intensify as it heads on out into the Gulf of Mexico. And this weekend, all eyes are going to be on the Gulf of Mexico as we wait to see just how strong Hurricane George is going to get and where it's going to hit next. Hurricane George, as of 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, centered about 515 miles southeast of Mobile, Alabama. Winds at 105 miles per hour. That makes it a Category 2 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. It's moving west-northwest at 14 miles per hour. The pressure up now to 975 millibars. Now, I want to go over the hurricane watches and warnings for you. As we take a look, we can see that we do not have the warnings in effect anymore along the eastern coastline of Florida. However, we still have hurricane warnings from Sarasota all the way to Key Largo and Key West. Still some tropical storm warnings in effect right in here for the western coastline of Florida. And this is very important. We have now hurricane watches in effect from Morgan City, Louisiana to St. Marks in Florida. Those are subject to change. We may see those changed over to hurricane warnings very, very soon, depending on what happens with Hurricane George. I am joined now by hurricane expert John Hope. John, we've been following this hurricane. It's moving away from the Keys, but we've noticed a little bit of a change in the last couple of hours.
Yes, it kind of slowed down a little bit, but we think it's going to basically move about the same toward the west-northwest, gradually curve toward the northwest. Now, our focus is going to begin to shift, though, from the peninsula of Florida and the Florida Keys up to the northern Gulf, where this hurricane is headed or is about to head, we think.
All right. As we look at the radar, we can see heavy rain is still a problem in places like Key West. You can see that band of heavy rain on top of you there. And we can also see some outer bands of strong thunderstorms capable of producing very strong winds and possibly tornadoes.
Yes, there's been some very nasty weather up over the peninsula today, far away from where the core of the hurricane is. But that's pretty typical, Janetta, when we get this kind of a landfalling hurricane, to see these tornadoes occur in rain bands that are way out from the center of the hurricane.
And that threat is going to remain through the evening hours. We have our tornado watch in effect until 11 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. And John, you were saying earlier you believe that will be extended.
Very likely. I don't think the situation has calmed down there yet. I think there'll be more tornadoes and more tornado threats, so I think that watch will be extended.
What can you tell us about the center of circulation?
Well, we can see the center of circulation pretty well. Sometimes we can see it better than we can other times, but it's pretty clearly visible. Well, I didn't draw that too well, right in there. You can see where the center is, and that is moving off to the west. And the good news is for the Keys, it's pulling away. Now, what that's going to do in the Florida Keys, Key West, and the middle and lower Keys in particular, the winds will gradually subside, although some of them are still pretty strong. The rain is going to be very slow to move out. It's going to be raining there rather heavily at times for a good part of the night.
Not a good sign for a lot of folks. Now, as we start thinking about the weekend, a lot of folks are off work already, and they're wondering what's going to happen along the Gulf.
Well, that's of course what we have to really start to focus on and to worry about and to try to diagnose the best we can. We think this is going to gradually begin to curve a little bit more towards the north, and that's going to take it up towards the North Gulf Coast. And we're going to have to really watch that carefully the next day or so and come up with a very precise forecast of where we think the landfall is going to be. The Hurricane Center will too. And you pointed out it was important, those watches at the beginning of the show, and they really are, because some of those watches are going to be changed to hurricane warnings. Remember, a watch means there's a possibility of hurricane conditions developing in 36 hours or so, whereas, and whenever a warning is put up, that means that hurricane conditions are imminent within 24 hours or so.
Okay, and we are expecting it to strengthen and move in that direction.
Yeah, that's always a little difficult to forecast exactly, but from all the indications that we have, we would expect this hurricane to get a bit stronger. It's pretty well up in the Category 2 now, and it could certainly be a Category 3. That would be sustained winds of more than 110 miles per hour.
All right, thank you so much, John Hope, for your expertise. We'll be checking back with you in about half an hour. Okay. We have a crew standing by in Pensacola, Florida. Kristen Dodd is there. Kristen, can you tell us about the preparations that are underway?
Well, Janetta, definitely people here are getting prepared. They're taking that hurricane watch very seriously. Although judging by today, it's an absolutely gorgeous day here along the Gulf Coast. I am at Pensacola Beach, and it is a beautiful day. Plenty of sunshine. Folks were out in the water and enjoying a good beach day. If you didn't know any better, you would not know that a hurricane was approaching. Now, fortunately, people here at Pensacola Beach do know that a hurricane is approaching, as they've been watching the Weather Channel throughout the day. Today at the Home Depot here along the area, we have been seeing brisk sales of plywood for boarding up the windows, also plenty of batteries being sold, as well as chainsaws in the event that cleanup does have to take place after this hurricane does approach this area. Folks here are not wasting any time in getting ready. How are you?
I'm very concerned. We're leaving as soon as we get everything taped up and the boards on the windows. We're out of here. We've been through, I guess, a couple hurricanes, and we're not staying. We're smart enough not to stay. We're leaving.
Also getting ready are the emergency planners here at Escambia County. Today they were meeting several times throughout the day and manning the phones, and also considering whether or not to issue evacuation orders. And as of 5 o'clock local time, those evacuation orders have been issued for Pensacola Beach, Santa Rosa Island, also Perito Key, and also for Destin, Florida. So many folks are going to be heading out over the bridges and away from the beaches area. With me now is Monty Blues, and he is the general manager of Santa Rosa Island Authority. And thank you very much for joining us. Tell me a little bit about the evacuation. Right now, what should people be doing?
People should either be leaving the hazardous coastal areas or preparing to leave. They should be getting all their supplies, securing the facilities, and heading out.
Are people taking this evacuation order seriously?
Oh yes, we take it very seriously. We experienced Hurricane Erin in Opal in 1965, and where we are now standing.
This is what it looked like in Marathon, Florida today as Hurricane George swept through, leaving behind damage and debris. A curfew remains in effect for the Keys with widespread power outages. One Key Largo resident says the hurricane altered water levels in Florida Bay. Hurricane George is churning through the Gulf at this hour. Good evening and welcome to Weather Center. I'm Dan Atkinson. The Florida Keys are still feeling the effects of the hurricane. Earlier today, gusts reached as high as 113 miles an hour. The big question now is, where will Hurricane George next make landfall? Jeff Morrow is in the forecast center with the latest.
And Hurricane George is taking its time moving away from the Keys. Now the center, or the eye of the hurricane, is pretty much east and northwest of the Key West area, but on that east side we're still getting a lot of wind and a lot of water coming in from the south and the southeast into the Keys, so conditions there are still fairly bad. Let's show it to you on the satellite perspective first of all. And again, here is Key West, about right in here, and the eye of the hurricane off toward the west-northwest. But again, it's the southerly flow coming up here, still lashing at parts of the Keys. We had some reports of winds gusting at some of the automated stations there, upwards of 80 miles an hour here just within the last hour or two. Here is the latest advisory, and we'll be getting a brand new advisory out momentarily from the Hurricane Center. But as of 5 p.m., 24-9 north, 82-9 west, or about 515 miles southeast of Mobile. Winds at 105 miles an hour, so that makes it a Category 2 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale, moving west-northwest as it has for most of its life. 14 miles an hour, that may be slowing a bit. Pressure down to 975 millibars, definitely still slowly but surely deepening. Let's show you the watches and warnings that are up currently. There are hurricane warnings up still from Key Largo all the way down, of course, through Key West, then right up the west coast of Florida all the way past Sarasota. From there north to Bayport, tropical storm warnings are out. And then as you head up to the northern Gulf coastal areas from St. Mark's all the way west to Morgan City, Louisiana, that is a hurricane watch, and that may be changed to a hurricane warning sometime late tonight or early tomorrow morning, depending on the speed of this hurricane. Joining me now here in the Forecast Center is our tropical expert, John Hope. And John, this system continues on that west-northwest track, just kind of grazed the Keys today, but it was enough to do some damage.
Well, yeah, the center actually passed just to the west of Key West. I was watching the wind change there, and it went just to the west, but they got some very strong winds around there, 113 mile an hour gusts and around Sand Key, I think, and Sombrero Key got very strong winds, and as you point out, still some strong winds there.
Yeah, and it may take a little while, probably the rest of this evening at least, for that to start to really die down. Yeah,
I think the wind will die down gradually during the evening, but the rain is pretty slow to get out. That's going to take that a while. The rain, especially in the lower Keys, for a good part of the night, I think.
All right, do you think there's going to be any more problem with any storm surge down that far south?
No, well, I'm sure with that south wind coming up that, you know, the water levels are above normal, but the main part of the surge should be gone now that the hurricane's moving out.
Right, and access to the Keys, I think, is still restricted at this time. So, again,
yes,
we want to wait until everything calms down before folks start thinking about going back. We're not quite done with the hurricane there yet.
No.
Let's go ahead and show you what it looks like on the satellite, John. And again, can still pick out where the eye is. This little red shaded area to the east of the eye, a little disconcerting.
Yeah, that's a big flare-up of very heavy showers right near the center, so we're watching it carefully. However, you know, the recon was out there, and each time for a while they showed the pressure had dropped a little bit. The last time it did not do that. So I don't think there's any explosive intensification going on. It may be some gradual, but not very abrupt.
All right, and let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of radars here, because this pretty much graphically shows. By the way, the Key West Doppler radar was knocked off the air earlier today when the eye wall came past, but we're still getting the radars out of Miami and up from Tampa to show this area, and you can see very well still a very solid area of rain and wind coming into the Keys there, John.
And just about all the Keys, with the possible exception of Key Largo, are still getting some pretty heavy rain.
Right, and as we mentioned, winds gusting 60, 70, maybe close to 80 miles an hour. Now, some of these other bands here, John, these yellows that we're seeing here, that can be pretty dangerous as well, even though it's far away from the hurricane
Well, they really
center.
can, because that is where we find the tornadoes. We don't usually find the tornadoes very near the core of the hurricane, rather out in the rain bands that are quite a distance out. And we've seen this happen pretty often in Florida, this kind of a hurricane, so that's not very surprising at all to see that kind of severe weather there.
Okay, now this is a Doppler radar estimate since 8 o'clock this morning of how much rain has fallen. Down here at the bottom of your screen, the Doppler is saying somewhere near maybe 4 inches of rain, but we think that might be a little bit underestimated.
I think it is. I think you'll find that there are some areas there that had more rain than that.
Okay, and a little bit farther up the coast, the bands aren't only down near the hurricane and down toward Miami and Tampa, but we have some bands even farther north. Those could have severe weather in them as well.
Yeah, they really could. And of course, there's a tornado watch out, and it's last time I saw it was updated till 11 o'clock, but I feel quite sure that will be extended into the night.
All right, now, after this hurricane finally does move away from South Florida, John, the real big question, obviously, well, there are two questions. Will it intensify more? And more importantly, where do we think it's going to be coming in?
Well, I think the answer to the first question, intensification, is very likely to intensify some. We think it's probably going to be a Category 3 hurricane, at least in the northern Gulf, which makes it a major hurricane. Now, the movement, about all we're willing to say at the moment is we expect it to be up somewhere toward the middle of the northern Gulf Coast, but so I'd say in the whole watch area, all the way from St. Mark's to Morgan City, that people had better be on the guard here. And some of that area, sometime later, earlier on, I think there was some speculation that we might put up warnings tonight, or the Hurricane Center might, but I doubt if that happens because it really hasn't moved, so rather more likely to happen tomorrow.
Okay, so our forecast here, in other words, we have it Sunday morning up here right along the Gulf Coast. It may, and I emphasize it may be a little slower than that.
It might be. I don't know that we're ready to say that yet, but that's something that's going to be evaluated from hour to hour, and just as soon as there is any indication of a change, we'll certainly let you know about that.
All right, and we just got the new information on the, actually this still says the 5 p.m. advisory, so I'm not sure that we have it. That may be wrong, but it looks like there's new information on here. So I'll go ahead and read this down for you here. The 8 p.m., okay, so this is the new advisory, 24.7 north, 83.1 west, 85 miles west of Key West, Florida, and still 105 miles an hour, John, and the central pressure is 974 millibars is what we're getting right now.
Okay, fine.
All right, so not too much change, but the hurricane is slowly moving away. And again, John, what factors are going to be involved in moving this hurricane?
Well, one thing we have been noticing with a great deal of interest, we have a low in the upper atmosphere out here in the western Gulf of Mexico, and there seems to be some, and the circulation around it like so, and there seems to be some tendency for this hurricane to want to rotate around that a little bit, and that's why it hasn't turned much toward the northwest yet, but we think it will later. We have a rig.
Like to plan ahead for their day. I can help you out. Right now, it's your local forecast on the Weather Channel.
for joining us here on the Weather Channel for Storm Watch. Storm Watch this hour sponsored by Home Depot. And of course, we are focusing our attention in large part on the tropics. Here is your tropical update with the latest not only on Hurricane George, but also on the other 3 hurricanes which are in the Atlantic Basin at this time. We'll point them out to you first in this wide satellite view and then give you the details one by one. And of course, you'll have complete coverage on Hurricane George coming up at the top of the hour as we rejoin Jeff Morrow in the Forecast Center. Very likely he will be talking with our hurricane expert John Hope again at that time. Here is George, and then farther out in the Atlantic, of course, George is in the eastern Gulf of Mexico now after having swept across the Keys. This is Hurricane Karl. Here is Hurricane Ivan, and this is Hurricane Jeanne. Now, the latest coordinates as of 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time from the National Hurricane Center. George was centered near latitude 24.7 north, longitude 83.1 west, or about 85 miles to the west of Key West, Florida. That's where the core of Hurricane George was at 8 o'clock. Maximum sustained winds 105 miles per hour, not moving much, just drifting to the west-northwest at a very slow speed, if any movement at all, and 974 millibars, the central pressure. Here's the color-enhanced infrared satellite view, which, as you may remember, it gives by the brighter reds the coldest, highest cloud tops, which would typically be those areas where we'd be finding the heaviest rainfall. And you can see still the eye of the center of circulation here of Hurricane George, and a lot of torrential rain continuing to fall as it continues now to make its way over the eastern Gulf of Mexico, and it's expected by the National Hurricane Center to be increasing in strength over these next hours as the waters of the Gulf are still quite warm. Notice here how widespread the rain is and how distinct the eye is in this radar scan. The eye here off to the west of Key West, and still a lot of rain sweeping on in from Naples on down toward Key Largo. Some rain bands spiraling into places like West Palm Beach and on further up to the central portion of the east coast of Florida. Some of the heavier precipitation indicated here, one of these outer rain bands sweeping in from the southeast, moving on toward Tampa and points just to the south, such as Point George or Point Gourd. There is the possibility for the hurricane to touch off some tornadoes, which is typical with a landfalling hurricane, and as a consequence of that, a tornado watch covers a large part of Florida at this time. Strike probability, as you can see, there is a wide possibility here for where the hurricane might go once it begins to make its movement again, but the possibility is high, as you can see in the red, all the way from the Louisiana Delta on around to the Big Bend area of the state of Florida. And as a consequence of that, interests along the Gulf Coast are certainly advised to stay tuned for the very latest information from the National Hurricane Center, and once again we'll have updates at the top of the hour. Hurricane Karl, 1,400 miles, centered 1,400 miles west-southwest of the Azores, maximum sustained winds 75 miles per hour, moving to the northeast at 14 miles per hour, not expected to change much in strength or in motion during the next 24 hours. Hurricane Ivan, maximum sustained winds about 80 miles per hour, moving to the northeast at 18. It is likely to remain about that same basic strength and increase in speed and turn more toward the east over the next 24 hours. And then lastly, Hurricane Jeanne, maximum sustained winds 90 miles per hour, moving to the north-northwest at around 12 miles per hour. It is not expected to change much in strength or in motion during the next 24 hours. And we see in the next tropical wave coming off the coast of Africa, it will be watched during this very active time in the tropics.
Hurricane George is pounding the Florida Keys. Now other parts of the Gulf Coast are bracing for its impact. For expert, reliable coverage, watch Weather Center next.
This program was sponsored by the Home Depot.
Home Depot is like 5 stores in one.
Well, Home Depot's ideal really is to make sure the customer gets what they need. This is not a little hardware store. They only have 5 of one type of thing. We have 100 of one type of thing. We're very proud of the selection we can offer people.
You're going to find name brand quality products.
It's a one-stop shopping place. You can get all this stuff here at Home Depot.
Tackle any job with Campbell Hausfeld air compressors. Look for the 5-horsepower Paint Pro or the 2-horsepower Twin Stack at the guaranteed low price at the Home Depot.
This man thinks he bought the best tractor to buy.